Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Fabulous to have you all here again for another Real Learners webinar. Tackling a topic today that has been middle of conversations that I've been having with people who work in large organisations, particularly people who've been in that middle management or upper management position where your responsibility becomes less about your own performance and more about enabling and empowering the performance of other people. And what we've done today is, or what I'm presenting to you today is a bit of a snapshot, I guess, of this approach to coaching that we've developed. And even when I say that, I feel a little shiver run down my spine, because I guess first thing I should do is thank and congratulate you for coming along today to learn about yet another approach to coaching. When I've had a look at what types of coaching are available to you, the list is quite exhaustive to the point of being exhausting. I know that you can go out there and invest in performance coaching, skills coaching, career coaching, life coaching, business coaching, executive coaching, cognitive coaching, behavioural coaching, succession coaching, legacy coaching, team coaching, and even targeted coaching. And the reason that I'm actually not trying to lump coaching for learning in with all of those is that what I believe is that most of those have an endpoint in mind, which means that we coach to somebody else rather than for them or with them. And so this approach is about coaching for learning, which ain't no end point. So learning itself is a skill, it's a capacity, and that's what we're looking to do when we coach for learning. Is we're saying we don't have a destination in mind. What we're interested in is, are we genuinely building capacity of the person that we're coaching? And we're going to see where that goes. So we have less destination in mind. And some people think that I'm inclined here to say, well, that means we must be working on the journey. We're not. I've got absolutely no idea where the journey is going to go. What I am saying here is that I think that what we're doing metaphorically is working on the engine of the vehicle. We're saying if we've got somewhere to go, let's make sure that the vehicle that's taking us there is capable of traversing the terrain that we're going to hit, and is just highly tuned and ready to be able to do a fantastic job of getting from A to whatever B you have in mind incredibly quickly. So when we're coaching for learning rather than coaching to get someone to learn, there are some philosophical shifts that we need to make. And what I'd like to do is to unpack this in this webinar today for you, what those philosophical shifts are. So to that point, I want to, I guess, point out that I haven't over-prepared for today's webinar, because what I've tried to do is stay true to my words there in introducing the webinar. I haven't said, right, I need to provide enough content that I can get all my attendees today through to, you know, a nice tightly wound bow at about 50 minutes into the webinar, so that there's a chance for them to ask any questions if they got them, and then I'm on my way by 3 o'clock. That would be focusing on an end point. What I'm trying to do today is to provide for you an experience that will allow you to start to do this work straight away. And of course, if you need some help with that, then we're here to do that for you. Okay, so let's get moving on what we're talking about here. So I guess if today's going to be about coaching for learning, I really want you to, I guess, start now in terms of being active in your own learning. So one of the things that you'll notice about coaching for learning is that the activity is two-sided. So it's not just about providing feedback or critique for people such that the other can do the action, that it's a very active process for both of the people involved. And I want to encourage you that I would love to have your involvement today. You will no doubt already be able to see a GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, and there's a couple of ways that you can step up and get involved. And you'll see me rather, you know, I don't know what the antonym for seamlessly is, or with seams in some way. You'll see me rather clumsily, perhaps. Occasionally I'll move the mouse or click on something and you'll see a quick change on the screen. You wonder, what on earth was that all about? And what it is me going and having a look at the attendee list. So just to prove that I can see Rosie in here today, I can see Ian, I can see Eleanor, I can see Jeremy, I can see Jacinda, I can see Ben. You know, so there's lots of people in the room today that when I flick quickly up and down that list, I can tell you here. And I'd like to invite you in to participate in some way. So the couple of ways that you can participate are, first of all, to put your hand up. So you'll see that there's a little hand symbol on your GoToWebinar control panel. And just by touching, just by giving that a click, you can put your hand up. I have the capacity at my end to unmute you, and we can make sense of this together. Making sense is an incredibly important and valuable thing to do, because what I'm not giving you today are, these are the 6 steps to being able to coach for learning. What I'm giving you is a philosophical framework, and then a few pointers around the types of goals that you can set that will complement each other, which is when you get that momentum of goals that complement each other. You certainly do get some learning and some self-actualization and realization starting to happen. And because of that, because I'm not saying step 1 do this, step 2 do that, this is no sequence, this isn't a sequential learning experience for you today. Sometimes we need a sense make. So I really want to encourage you that if you put your hand up, your question will not only be of value to you, but certainly I reckon to the rest of the room too. And if you're feeling shy, you can write your question. So go to the question box, or sometimes it's, depending on the software you've got, there'll be a chat opportunity there for you. And in the GoToWebinar control panel there, and you can put your question in there. You'll see me clumsily keep an eye on it every now and then just to see if there's something happening over there. And I'll get to it, and we'll make sure that we chew on that a little bit today. Like I said, I've underprepared deliberately for this webinar to allow room for that. So would love you to fill that room. Okay, let's get going. Let's I guess first of all do this philosophical shift that I'm talking about. I said before that all of those approaches that I listed to learning, to coaching that I mentioned before, tend to be geared around us. We want certain things to happen, and the most common thing that we want when we coach somebody is we want their performance to improve. And I want to let you know that that's why this is a fundamental difference, a philosophical shift, if you will. You can see Socrates there doing his thing, thinking about philosophy and just being a general philosopher. So what I want to do is to unpack for you why it's important that we shift our philosophy when it comes to the way that we coach. First thing is that I think that when we coach for performance, we focus on outcome. Now, when we do that, I think that what we do is we design that end point that I was talking about. Whereas I want to point out to you that when we're really serious about coaching effectively, we're more interested in process. We're more interested in the flow that people get into as a result of the learning that they are embarking upon. Even the Harvard Business Review did some studies around the way that people interact in the workplace, and I really like this study because often the HBR will focus on outcome. What are the organisations that are achieving certain outcomes? When they looked at process, they found that when organisations focus on a fair process, that means that they're interested in their employees saying that this is a fair place to work. I feel like I've been treated fairly in the organisation. They looked into, is it outcome or is it process? Do people want a fair outcome or do people want a fair process? And what they found was that it's the process that matters most. In fact, what they found is that people are more likely to go along with or comply with or accept an unfair outcome if they feel that a fair process has been observed. I'm often saying that I think that this is exemplified by the AFL tribunal or the NRL judiciary, wherever it is you might be. These days, not many people seem to get what they want. It's sort of a little bit of a Hail Mary, a little bit of a hope when they go to the tribunal. Yet there are still 2 types of people who leave the tribunal. There's the ones that walk out to face the waiting media and they say no comment, and they sort of gruffly, walk off with their little entourage into a black vehicle, spin the wheels and take off through the car park, very angry with the outcome. And then there's the ones that face the media and say, you know what, we presented what we thought was a pretty good case. We didn't get what we were looking for tonight, but we want to thank the tribunal for a fair hearing. We'll get on with it, and we'll see you again in another 2 or 3 weeks when I've served my sentence. And what's funny, I think, is that the next morning on Talkback Radio, the callers can't handle it. there's people screaming and yelling about the unfairness of this player getting 2 week suspension and this player getting off only a month ago, because they're hung up on the outcome. Whereas the player themselves, because they were involved in the process, they were engaged with the process, they've been able to move on from that. So understanding that what we're coaching for here is to get people into flow rather than get past a certain outcome or achieve a certain outcome is incredibly important. The next thing that's really important to note when you're talking about performance coaching is that you set goals. It's all about setting goals, whereas when you coach for learning, you're interested in progress. Now, I'm not going to tell you that when you coach for learning there are no goals, because there certainly are. I'm going to tell you about 3 types of goals that you can use here today. But I don't think that the goal itself should be the outcome, should be what we're targeting when we get into performance. I think the goals should emerge by being able to set up some really clever progress targets. Now, the thing about goals that are a bit of a nuisance is that they're quite binary, and the way that we use a binary goal, and what I mean by that is you either did it or you didn't. You could set the goal at getting better at a certain aspect in your organisation. You could set a sales target, for instance, that you need to hit to be able to be successful at that goal, but it doesn't tell us about progress. It doesn't tell us whether you've got further from where you are now. So you may have a sales target that sits at a certain level, and you've set a new target for yourself, and you may achieve 95% of that, but you failed. You didn't reach the goal. And when we introduce binary goals, what we do is we also welcome with it shame and failure. So when people feel shame, they respond in a variety of different and often negative ways. It's possible for people to experience shame and failure positively. It's possible for a very well-adjusted, emotionally intelligent person to go, wow, I didn't get to my goal. I've let myself and let the organisation down today, and they think about it as they're walking towards the car at the end of the day, going, yeah, okay, I've got, that wasn't great news to get, but I guess I can live with that. I'll do better next time. But most people don't. Most people respond to shame quite negatively. They either attack themselves and start to say, I suck. And the great part about I suck is that it starts to become true. The more you tell yourself you suck, the more likely it is that you will. They withdraw, meaning that they'll just start calling in sick. They avoid, which means they don't want to feel the shame of failure, so they hit the thirsty camel on the way home a little more often than they should, meaning that their performance after any day that they have made a trip to the thirsty camel is going to be compromised, and meaning that we've set them up to potentially avoid shame using a really destructive habit, or they attack others, which means that they're coming swinging for you, and you may not even know it, because they'll come swinging for you while they're in the tea room, and while you're not. So they'll attack other people. So whenever we invite shame and failure into the organisation, we make a philosophical decision to live with the outcomes of it, which are quite often negative. When you're coaching for performance, you focus on benchmark, and then which means that you're not thinking about capacity, you're not thinking about growth. So I think that here what happens when we introduce benchmarks, we compare, we draw a line through the middle of our teams. We say that you're either one of the good people who can hit the benchmark, or you're one of the bad people. And again, that becomes a real self-fulfilling prophecy. What we're interested in is, are all of the people in your organisation moving forward? So I do, as many of you know, I do a lot of work with schools, and there's an approach in schools that I rebel against, and I cop a bit of flack for throwing so many stones at this, but it's called Class Dojo. And what it is the teacher hands out points throughout the day for hitting various learning targets or even behavioural targets, and says, yeah, the kid, that's 2 dojo points. They run up to the board, they put an extra couple of points on themselves. It's a little monster, so the kids are very motivated by it. But what happens is it eventually lets people know where they are in the ranking system. So once you are a bottom of the ladder dojo kind of person, the likelihood is that you're not going to go, oh great, I'll lift my game so that I can be a little bit more like little Billy that's sitting next to me. The high likelihood is that you're sitting there, and if I may speak so plainly, going, fucking Billy, you can't believe he just sucks up to the teacher. That's why he gets it. So we've introduced, as I mentioned before with goals, when we introduce shame and failure, when we introduce benchmarks, we introduce comparison, and it's certainly a key to wonderful misery when you introduce that comparison. One of the challenges I think we face when we coach for performance is that it's a mandated thing, which means it tends to be dictated by the calendar, often annual, or sometimes even down to quarterly, but still it's dictated by time, not by progress. And what we're looking for is to introduce a higher level of self-direction. So a story, briefly, if I may, from when I was a leader, and again, this comes from my time in schools. I had a fabulous teacher in my staff called Lara. And I didn't understand why Lara wouldn't come and be coached by me. We had an annual performance conversation that was mandated. Every teacher knew they had to do this mandated performance conversation where we would do the tick and flick and fill out the right boxes. And it shouldn't have been intimidating for Lara, but I could not nail her down. I'd arrange a coaching meeting and a performance meeting, and she would disappear. She would suddenly get a dentist appointment. There was always a reason that I couldn't get her, and eventually I had to basically ambush her. I had to just show up when I knew she couldn't leave and say, right, let's do this. What's going on here? And I said to her at the time, I said, why has this been so hard? How come I can't get you to sit down and have a chat about your teaching? And she said, oh. She goes, you want the truth? And I said, yeah. And she goes, I've been teaching for 8 years. She goes, I've been able to successfully avoid doing these conversations for 7 of those 8 years. The 1 year that I couldn't get out of it, I did it, and it meant absolutely nothing. The person that was was coaching me filled out the goals, saved it on the server. Neither of us ever looked at it again. It was a waste of our time, and I'm not into wasting time. Well, yeah, cop that. So I said, can you just give me a crack at it? Give me one crack, and if it's no good to you, then I'll tell you what I'll do is write out the performance template again in 12 months' time and just ask for your signature. You don't even have to read it. And she said, okay, I'll give you that. She was a good seed. And so we sat down and we worked out some very simple goals, and I'm going to show you the 3 types of goals that Lara and I worked on very shortly. And what we found was that Lara didn't wait 12 months for the next conversation to come about. She walked into me and said that I've completed my operational goal, I want another one. And this was 4 weeks after the conversation that we had. And I went, right, okay, that's great. So I quickly opened my laptop, pulled up her performance plan, said, let's update that, saved it under a different date, and bang, we've got performance plan number 2 in Lara's folder on the server. She came back in a few weeks later and said, Adam, I've done the professional goal, I need another one. And we're right. And so I quickly opened it up, and bang, we've got number 3. And what happened over a period of 12 months was not that we returned to the original document. We looked at the 11th performance plan because Lara had begun to self-direct her own improvement. And that's what happens when you focus on learning rather than on performance. It's incredibly exciting. I think that from an outcome perspective, what you get when you focus on performance is dread. People dread that conversation. Oh, no. Because what they're going to do is they're going to hit me with that horrible sandwich feedback thing or something like that. And what we want is for people to view it like Lara as an opportunity to move forward. I think that what also happens when we focus on performance is that people feel that it's something that's necessary. They feel that it's something that they have to do. Whereas once we focus on learning, people see that it is something that's important and they want to do it. So when it's necessary, people comply. They'll do it, they'll sit there, they'll dance the dance with you. They'll tell you what they think you most want to hear, and they'll hide as best as they possibly can the things that we really should be talking about. But when I think that people view in your organisation coaching as being important, they don't comply, they cooperate, which is a really cool thing to have happen. But you know what, more than anything, I think that if you were talking about the key difference and these lists of words that sit behind the difference between coaching for performance and coaching for learning, is that when I think we coach for performance, we're trying to make people accountable because somehow we've convinced ourselves that accountability is the great lever that we need in order to be able to perform. The truth is what we have just invited into our organisation when we focus really intently on accountability is the ability to be able to work your way around it. We've tried to do it with, for instance, our road rules. So we have speed limits and we have speed cameras whenever we build a new tollway or a freeway. Certainly the case for me in the Melbourne area. If I drive up Peninsula Link or East Link or City Link, any of the links that will take me from my place in Dramana up to the airport, for instance, when I travel for work, they've tried to make me accountable for staying at the speed limit, for hitting my target of staying under the speed limit. And the way they've done it is to install speed cameras at various distances. The most common place that the speed cameras are installed is under the bridges. So as you drive under a bridge, you can actually see the speed cameras have been installed under the bridge, and they take a little snapshot of you and they keep you moving. And you would think that that would make people accountable to that speed limit. It doesn't. All it does is make people creative about avoiding that accountability, and you come to experience the bridge breakers that sit along those three links, the people who speed by you and then you cruise past them again when you get to the bridge because they've been driving at 120 kilometres between bridges. They slow down to 80 to go under the bridges, and then they speed up again in between. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I don't necessarily just blame the bridge breakers. For me, what I think we're doing is we're setting them up to try to creatively get around that accountability. What great coaching should be is an exercise in discovery. It should be, I try to think about, that I've got that metaphor for accountability is the bridge breakers, but my metaphor for discovery is that it's great coaching for learning is about looking under rocks. It's about lifting as many rocks that are out there in people's lives and saying, what's under here? What's behind that? What's under this? What's this all about? And when we explore together, we discover things that are genuinely worth working on, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when those things start to happen. And more than anything, I guess, what coaching for learning does for me is it encourages me to remember that the preparation required to coach for learning compared to coaching for performance is much lower. That's good news, isn't it? That you can become a coach for learning a lot more easily than you can become a coach for performance, because when you can become a coach for performance, what you need to do is you need to plan what you're going to say. And I certainly, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I bet that all of you have had the experience of having to sit up late at night and plan what you're going to say going into the performance conversation that you've got to have with that person, or that coaching session that you've got to have with that person. And I certainly did it. I remember the fabulous Kim, and I'm allowed to tell Kim's story because she gave me permission, which is lovely. She's an awesome operator. And Kim was one of my teachers when I was a principal. And Kim had two key areas in her work that were a problem. One was that the program she wrote for her teaching was kind of a dog's breakfast, and that needed work. And the other thing about Kim's work was that her kind of behavioural management stuff in the classroom wasn't all that flash either. That needed some work too. But every time I wanted to bring that conversation up with Kim, it got dragged back into Kim's strengths, not her challenges. So I sat up thinking about what are the words I'm going to say? How am I going to broach the subject of the program and the behaviour stuff with Kim? Because every time I do, she just brings up how good she is with maths and science and tournament of the minds and all this wonderful stuff that she does. And in those areas, it's true. She was wonderful, absolutely fantastic. How am I going to avoid the trap of this? And I read an article one night that said to get Socratic, and that's what this, why I choose this picture, about being Socratic. And Socrates' big thing was just ask better questions, just ask good questions. And I went, okay, so what would I ask? And I went into the meeting with Kim the next day and I said, so Kim, what would your strengths be? And she told me about the maths and the science and everything else that she did that was just awesome. And I said, Kim, I reckon all of us have got weaknesses. What do you think your weaknesses are? She goes, it's probably my program and the behaviour management stuff. I thought, wow, there it is. We looked under a rock, and all I did was, instead of saying, Kim, look under that rock, I said, Kim, what rock do you want to look under? What would help to get better? And it was just framing it as a question. as an opportunity to explore, an opportunity to discover something. And when you do that, I think that you tend to discover the right stuff. And sometimes we panic. We think that we have to have that. And if Kim had turned around and said, look, it's probably my program and it's my relationship with my staff, my fellow colleagues, you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it, because what I obsess over in learning is progress. And if I can get Kim to have some progress and some success in the area that she wants to succeed in, the next time we have a conversation, as I mentioned with Lara, it was as soon as 4 weeks, we can look under a different rock. And eventually she'll get to the target that I want. If I set the goal or the outcome of Kim improving those 2 areas, she will avoid the accountability that's attached to that. If I help her to be in a conversation where we look under rocks, eventually she'll pick up the right rock, because we're moving rocks. We're getting things done, and what we're on about here is progress over the goal or the outcome here. So I hope that makes sense for you, and I hope that I know that I'm sort of labouring this point a little without giving you anything particularly concrete here, or, like I said, sequential. But I think it's really important to understand that this isn't another coaching for learning. Should not be viewed as another on that big list of different types of coaching. Now, I believe that when you get into great coaching for learning, what happens is that you start to identify different types of goals or targets that can be set. Now, I don't want to get too, I said to you before that the word goal was on my performance side, the not so good side on the left. But I don't want to get too semantic over the word goal here, because I actually don't think it really matters. If you think about sport again, I mean, AFL footballers shoot at a goal, archers shoot at a target. I think they're pretty much executing the same kind of fundamental intention. I don't really care whether you call it a goal or a target. What I care is about the nature of it, and is it complementing work that allows you to get progress and learning. So I go back to the person who I remember well, I think, who focused on this so effectively was, I wrote about her this week, a fabulous boss of mine called June Wessels, who, when she gave me a job as her second in charge, June, and I'd made a commitment at that point that I would, whether I got the job or not, of any job I was applying for, that I would seek feedback. And so if I missed out on a job and I was reasonably inexperienced in the field that I was applying into, so sometimes some more experienced people got over the top of me, and I sought feedback to find out what my gaps were that I needed to fill, so that the next time I had a slightly better chance. But I also thought, well, you know what, I should be doing that even if I get the job. I should find out what got me the job. So I asked June, why did I get the job ahead of other people who were far more experienced than me? And June said, you got the job because you want my job, which was just fantastic. And she said, you know, I get that I'm going to lose you within 2 or 3 years. You're going to go on to, you know, stepping into a higher level in another organisation. But I know that you'll make a massive difference while you're here. And that's the job. That's why you got the job. And I said, yeah. I said, but I've got some gaps. And she said, I know. And I went, okay, you haven't worked with me yet. Yeah, how do you know? And she said, you've got no idea about the financial management of an organisation like this, and you'll need to pack that bag. But what June did that was incredibly clever was not allow me to just say, okay, I'm going to try while I'm here to get better at financial management. Because what does that mean? You know, what does progress look like in getting better at financial management? One of the first things that June did for me when I started in that job was to hook me into a fortnightly meeting with the business manager of the organisation, so that I would sit down and learn explicitly about a different aspect of the financial management of the school. And she said that her rule for it was we had to do that until both of us were bored. You know, so it was, I guess, in some ways far more a target than a goal. It was fortnightly. It wasn't get better at financial management. It was fortnightly meeting with the business manager. And what that did was it allowed June to have the opportunity to thank and congratulate both of us for having done that. That opportunity to thank and congratulate certainly underpins any high trust organisation that you're looking to build. So when it comes to setting personal goals, there's a couple of things I want you to think about. They are linked to the technical aspect. Oops, sorry, they're just linked to the technical aspects of the role or the industry. So that means it might not even be specific to the organisation that you're in. So for me, it was learn about financial management aspect of that organisation. Now, that's the organisation itself didn't see itself as one that needed to improve its financial management, and thereby it needed me up to speed. It was something that was going to apply wherever I was working. I needed that for wherever it is that I was going to go in the future, and encourage promotion and career acceleration. And to that point, it means that good people may even be led out of your team if you were allow them to develop professionally, that allow them to get better and become attractive to even competitors, which is a frightening thing to do sometimes. But the great part about June's organisation is that the list and the quality of applicants that she got every single time she had a vacancy was exemplary. While other people were complaining about the fact they can't get good people, that was never, ever, ever a problem for June. People wanted to work with her because she accelerated and she springboarded people into other parts of their careers, which was an incredibly exciting thing for them. And June got what she was looking for, which is what I articulated to you just a few minutes ago, is that she got people who changed her organisation and complemented it and filled needs. So when June was appointing people, she was very clear that she wasn't after the best candidate. She wasn't after the most experienced. She was after the person that best fitted the current need she has, which I think is incredibly sage advice. Just checking in, you've got a question there from Ben. Okay, Ben, if you'll forgive me, mate, I'm just going to read this out so that I don't get lost in trying to paraphrase. Asking better questions is one of my takeaways from an NLP workshop I attended last year. It was apparent to me that in the real world, away from the workshop, I was exposed to a lot of people who didn't ask good questions, especially my manager, who asks questions not because he's interested in the answers, because he wants to check off a list to say that he's checked. And I think that's what happens. Asking better questions, asking smart questions, asking open questions, and I'm including that there for Ben, is a great way to get people engaged in genuine answers. And the thing to do when you ask a great question, an open question, is to shut up. Now, let them process it, because what the people tend to do is they have a moment, they go, oh, what's the right answer to this? And they go, oh, hang on, I don't really know what he's looking for. And in that silence, they expect us to save them, which is quite extraordinary. And when we don't, they actually start to think. Now, in terms of shifting behaviour in an organisation, this is critical, because unless people think about the behaviour, they are totally they're incredibly unlikely to change their behaviour positively. My example for that is that none of us woke up this morning on a diet. You know, that doesn't happen. Behaviour doesn't change like that randomly. Well, the choice of what you eat for breakfast doesn't change randomly. You've got to think about it first. So we've got to get people to think, and just getting them to generate the answer that they think we want to hear is a poor way to get people to think and to change behaviour. Back to Ben's question, asking better questions has relevance to personal relationships too. Yep. And can be super powerful when a friend or a loved one or a partner asks quality questions. It shows genuine interest, among other things. Oops, I'm not keeping up. You were thinking about that one pretty deeply, Ben. But what you're tapping into here is that we're taking, when we're focusing on, and you'll see this as we work through these other goals, what you're noticing here is that we're talking about coaching people rather than content. So we're not trying to deliver something. We're not trying to teach something. We're looking to build capacity. And this is about these rules here. They apply not just to people in the workplace, but you're right, Ben. People in your home, people in your relationships. There's a study I saw recently about the home, and the well-worn expression that mothers tend to use, particularly for their teenage sons, around how many times do I have to tell you? The answer is about 17. So to get someone to commit to short-term memory on any sort of natural impulse, a particular habit or behaviour, you need to tell them 17 times within a reasonably short period of time, so they feel like this is where the whole concept of nagging comes from. It feels like we just need to say it over and over and over again. Yet, if you sit down with your teenagers over a meal one evening and say, how do you reckon you can make me happy tomorrow? and then sit there and shut up, the high likelihood is that they will eventually say something like, oh, I should clean up my room. And the likelihood of them living up to that expectation has been increased just by the fact that they've articulated it. So when we talk about delivering these questions, for instance, oh boy, I had to hold my breath when I said to Kim, what do you think your weaknesses are? Please say the right thing, please say the right thing, in my head. And all of a sudden she did. But if I rescued her there and said, hey, Kim, you know what, these are the things that I reckon, then I reckon I've flipped back over to coaching for performance. So it's coaching for learning is about understanding people. Coaching for performance means that you have already created a dynamic where you're proving to the other person that you know more about their job than they do. Operational goals are next. So professional goals, I often spoke to people just as a starting point and said, what we're going to do today, the aim of our conversation is we want you to have a professional goal, an operational goal, and the last one is a personal goal. But operational goals are very interesting. They link to your current business objectives, so that means that there's a high level of relevance for what's going on in your business. They may be relationship or team based, which means that sometimes the issue that they've got going on in your operations is not that they haven't understood that there's a particular component of their responsibility that isn't being addressed to its fullest capacity. The problem is that I can't do it because I'm not getting along with Barry. And so what we might like to do in terms of impacting locally is improve that relationship or improve that team. So if you're coaching somebody for learning who wants to get better at coaching their own team, you taking that as an operational goal and helping them to become better at coaching for learning or for building team is a very pertinent thing to do in order that they would achieve a business objective. And the great thing about operational goals is they're connected to immediate impact. Things change really quickly, and that's fantastic. That's what we're looking for, because this emphasizes what we're talking about here, is that emphasizes that thing about progress. So what did we do with Kim when she eventually said, I get that it's my program that's a problem and my behavior management stuff? What we did around the program stuff was to hook her in, and I took influence from June here, and to hook her in with the school's assistant principal, who was just a guru at programs, better at it than me. There was no point in me taking this on. So I teed up that fortnightly meeting for 4 fortnights. I said, so I want you to come back and talk to me about what you've implemented after 4 fortnightly 40-minute meetings with Shona. And she said, oh, okay, I can do that. And when it came to the behaviour thing, I said, okay, so who are the teachers that you admire? Who are the people who you'd like to be able to teach like? And she said, oh, it'd be Karen and Layla. And I went, okay, so what if we organised over the next 10 weeks for you to have 2 one-hour sessions in Layla's class and for you to have 2 one-hour sessions in Karen's class. And after each of those, you just wander by my office and tell me something that you picked up from it that you're going to implement. And she said, okay, I can do that. So all I had to do was arrange for her to be released from her current responsibilities with her class to be able to have those 4 one-hour sessions over the next 10 weeks. And they happened. And so that means that there was immediate impact, and there wasn't anything as vague and unachievable as get better at your program or get better at behaviour management. It was incredibly specific. Get these tasks done. I get to thank and congratulate Kim for that. And we have immediate local impact because she is implementing the things that she's learning straight away. She's getting some success, and we're getting a higher trust environment as a result. And then this is the one that I want to say to you are just way too often neglected when it comes to coaching, because we're so focused on the business objectives that we have. And that is to actually roll in some personal goals for people. Facilitate an ability for people to come to work at their very best, to come, as I used to say, with my tyres pumped up. What is it that I'm rolling into the performance plan that is purely and solely about capacity? And what I used to find is that that's about a personal goal. Connected to things like personal well-being is a really important thing to do. And just run one last little rule over your personal goals, which is there any sort of work relevance? And I've been tested on this. I had Mick on my staff, and Mick, God love him, told me that his personal goal that he wanted my support with was to quit smoking. And I was like, okay, where's the work relevance in that? And he said, Adam, we're a school. And I said, yeah. And he said, and you have a rule that is that if you need to smoke, you need to be somewhere off the school premises that no one on the school premises can even see you. I said, yeah. And he said, so every recess and every lunchtime, I jump in my car, I drive 2 kilometres down the road, I suck in 4 or 5 gaspers as fast as I possibly can, and then I come back to school. And I went, yeah, I'm still searching for work relevance. He said, I'm missing all the tea room conversations about stuff that people are doing at school. You know, the sense making that goes on when people have a coffee or when people eat their lunch. He said, I'm missing it all. And he said, and I know that other people are getting better at this stuff that you want us to do, and I'm not, because I'm not in on those conversations. And I thought, wow, bang, there it is. There's the work relevance. Now, your support in terms of personal goals doesn't need to be extreme. So for me, it wasn't about following Mick around like some stalker and making sure that he never smoked another cigarette. It was a Friday morning email. I would send an email on a Friday morning that said, Mick, how many darts have you had? And he knew that email was coming. And for me, it was one in about 8 different emails that I had to send on a Friday morning. I would send one to Mick that said, how many darts have you had? I would send one to Shannon that said, how many times have you been to the gym? Because she just said that she felt that her physical fitness was not allowing her to get successfully through a full day of her important work. I would send one to Karen to ask how her relationship was going with Philippa, because those two just weren't getting along and she wanted to chip away at that. And I asked Shona how she was going with her intention to not swear so much in the staff room, because she was trying to portray a more professional image to everybody that was there. So I had several of these emails. It took me about maybe a minute per email, 8-minute investment in the personal goals that were running across my school. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's not a bad way to get that done. The reason that I think that's a worthwhile return on your investment is that I'm wondering for you, if I send that email every Friday morning, what you think that does to Mick's sense of accountability around not only the smoking, but around his operational and his professional goals. So it sounds rather manipulative here to focus on personal goals, because they will get the operational and the professional goals done, but that's what it is. And when you invest in people, you invest in their performance. And I think that in isolation, professional and operational goals have a reduced capacity to get done if we haven't reinforced them with personal goals. Personal goals for me are the fuel that makes professional and operational goals achievable. And so those 3 types of goals, I think, don't sit in isolation. I see them as very much working in unison. And if you can bring that to bear in the coaching that you do, that people feel that it is worth getting these personal, professional and operational goals in place because of the progress and the achievement that they experience, I reckon you start to get people on board, which is pretty bloody exciting. All right, so hey, I'm going to start to wind up here, folks. So I guess what I want to do is encourage you that if you do have any questions, that to take Ben's lead and to pop something in the question box, or to even put your hand up at this point. I'm also going to let you know that the next webinar we're going to run is on May 16, and it's going to be about presentations with punch. I was talking to someone the other day about those 2 big fears that they reckon people have around, that people fear public speaking more than they fear death. And I had someone the other day tell me that for them that's almost exactly true, because it creeps into her psyche when she has to deliver a presentation, whether it's because she's delivering something that she learned at a conference, had to come back to her team and deliver a presentation on what she got so they can get some benefit from it, whether it's about delivering a new process or a change in the business or a new target in the business, or whether it's even having to go to that conference yourself and deliver what it is that your business has been doing and send a great message about what you've been doing. The notion of presenting freaks people out. So what I'm going to do in the next webinar is give you the opportunity to be able to deliver, to take away with you a template for designing presentations and for delivering presentations. I want you to have that. That'll be downloadable in the meeting, in the webinar. And you're going to learn exactly how to build a presentation that's not about you just getting up there and spraying everybody with information and hoping to get through the next 40 minutes alive. Our intentions behind this are going to be to engage people and to have them learn. in that situation. So if that sounds appealing, know that you are going to get an email after today's webinar, and it's going to have the recording of the webinar from today as well. So you're going to get a little YouTube link, so you'll be able to watch this again, and I hope that you'll feel that it's a benefit to you, but you're also going to get an invitation to be able to come along to this webinar and enjoy how you can deliver a presentation punch. And I guess the other thing I want you to do today is don't leave empty-handed. So there is the slide deck from today is available to you as a handout. So in these last few moments of the webinar today, make sure you jump into that handout section and quickly download the slide deck. I want you to have that available. And I guess what I also want you to do is know that if this notion of coaching differently, not just adding to another type of coaching that you can leave in the past and really just end up delivering sandwich feedback some sort of different way. If this notion of coaching for learning appeals to you, there's an entire framework that sits behind this that we'd be delighted to teach you and to teach your organisation. So if that appeals, reach out. Lots of contacty sort of stuff there on that screen that you can see in front of you right now. All right, I'm going to just do one last little scan of that attendee list. One little last scan of the question box there. I think I've got absolutely everything. And then we're going to let you go about your business. Hey, if you're on live today, have a fantastic little mini break over Easter, if that's what's ahead of you. If you're watching the recording of the webinar today, I hope you had one. And I'll see you all in May for presentations with Punch.